They drove up the street like they owned the block, two beat-up golf carts, blue LED strips under the seats. A woman in a visor barking orders like this was her private kingdom, and a man with a hard, impatient stare and a pistol tucked at his hip told my wife she couldn't jog past the clubhouse. That sentence is true, and it still feels impossible to say aloud. That morning rearranged everything we thought this neighborhood was. It took the ordinary and peeled it back to show how quickly civility can be dressed up as control. We moved to Willow Ridge for ordinary things. Morning coffee on the porch that warmed your hands, a yard where you could throw a blanket down in summer, neighbors who nodded when you walked by. June wanted peonies and afternoons where she could sit with a guitar without thinking about noise complaints. She hums while she does dishes. She runs because it lightens the day. That's the image most people took home. What they didn't see was a decade she'd spent in emergency response, the kind of work that trains you to keep breathing when everything tries to go loud. The carts blocked the road like a bad joke. Marlene, the visor woman, stepped out with a clipboard and a voice that demanded compliance, and Royce, the man with the gun, put his finger near the holster and said June couldn't be on HOA property. June looked him in the eye and said, "You don't get to point that at my wife." Royce smiled like he thought the smile made him bigger. "We keep things civil here," he said, as if civility could be polished on a clipboard. Marlene stepped forward, voice sharp. "This is for the community." She wanted applause. June replied, low and steady, "Being for the community doesn't mean scaring people into silence." That exchange lasted seconds, but it changed the tone. Words shifted the scene from performative to serious. I was on the porch, mug in hand, when June jogged by, earbuds in and smiling at the light. I remember the small sound my coffee made when it hit the porch boards, an ordinary thunk in the middle of a surreal morning. In the second before anything happened, you cataloged the little things, the flyaway hair, the rust on a wheel hub, the LED glow under the carts, and then you know something is about to break. Royce reached for his gun. June reacted. She didn't leap into a movie move. She moved the way someone trained to remove danger would: clean, precise, effective. The pistol skittered across hot asphalt, and Royce hit the ground with a surprised thud. Phones came out like witnesses had sprouted from the sidewalks. Marlene started shouting about officers and community protection, and suddenly the neighborhood that used to swap recipes at the mailbox was filming a conflict it had never imagined. Two men tried to intervene for Royce, voices brimming with bravado, but the footage shows how quickly performance collapses when authority is earned by posture rather than legitimacy. Deputies arrived soon after, because phones make evidence and evidence makes things real. The deputies didn't rush to judgments. They separated people, checked IDs, and took statements with a calm that felt professional and necessary. Royce got cuffed for brandishing and impersonation. The language of the arrest forms turned a wild morning into a set of dates and charges. Marlene insisted she and her volunteers were protecting property values and safety, but the officers' questions kept coming back to one thing. Who gave you the right to act as enforcement? It turned out the right couldn't be produced on a clipboard. Neighbors reacted in ways that surprised me. I expected the town to split neatly into two camps, but humans are messier than that. Some folks thought we should have let deputies handle it and criticized June for not stepping back. Others were furious that anyone would point a gun at a jogger on a public walkway. Conversations that used to be small about mulch, about the best plumber, became public reckonings about power and who gets to wield it. There were quiet apologies at backyard fences and sharp, whispered arguments in the grocery store aisle. The grayness was worse than a clean division because it forced people to examine what they valued: safety, order, or dignity. We had meetings. We had emails with the subject line "safety" in all caps sent at 2 a.m. Marlene tried to frame the whole thing as protecting the community. She talked about standards and volunteer enforcement like it was noble. At a town hall, neighbors asked pointed questions. An older man asked how volunteers were vetted. A young woman said she felt threatened walking to her car, and someone else asked if this was how we wanted to defend property values. Watching Marlene try to parry those concerns was like watching a costume unravel. People began to demand transparency, not speeches. The legal side was slow and oddly cold. Forms to fill out, statements to swear to, deputies who wrote down every word. June hated the attention. She kept telling me she wanted peonies and a guitar and none of the heat. But the reality is violence forces choices. We had to decide whether to press charges or let the system move on its own. We chose to cooperate, to put the facts in front of the people whose job it is to weigh them. That decision felt small and enormous at once. Small in paper and procedure, enormous in what it signaled about refusing intimidation. When the HOA board voted Marlene out, it felt both anticlimactic and cleansing. The men who'd come in the golf carts were arrested. Seeing names on files made the whole thing less like a nightmare and more like a chapter with a date. The HOA tried to rebrand transparency committees, clearer complaint processes, new bylaws about volunteers. Some neighbors breathed easier. Others kept an edge, the kind of wariness that lingers after a storm. What I come back to is the human calculus, how ordinary motives collided. Marlene wanted control. Royce wanted the performance of authority. June wanted a life that allowed her to breathe. When those motives meet, things get ugly. If someone had invited us to coffee instead of staging a confrontation, maybe they'd have learned June's name and her running route, and the whole thing would have never happened. Instead, authority was dressed in a visor and a gun, and a small, ordinary morning became a test of who we were willing to stand up to. Even now, the rituals of Willow Ridge have a new texture. People learn names they'd never used before. Cameras went up on porches not because everyone wanted surveillance, but because people wanted accountability. June changed her route. She jogs where more folks can see her. We planted peonies in the spring, fat and stubborn, and watching them bloom felt like reclaiming a small, ordinary victory. At night, she sometimes lies awake, not from fear, but from the oddness of how quickly life can demand you be someone you never planned to be. There's no tidy moral signposting here. Institutions can protect, and they can fail. Neighbors can be kind, or they can weaponize rules. The clearest truth is this: civility is a practice, not a guarantee. It means watering a neighbor's plants, yes, but also refusing to let power be performed without accountability. It means learning names, being present, and sometimes stepping in when someone dresses up intimidation in the language of safety. So where do you stand? Would you have intervened like June, or would you have stepped back and let officials handle it? Is community safety something volunteers should enforce, or should it be left to trained authorities? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The gray answers are the ones worth talking about. If this story landed with you, share it, hit like, and subscribe for more. And tonight, when you walk your block, try learning one name. It might be the difference between a morning that passes and a morning that changes everything.